Hello and welcome to Coffee on Crochet. Today we are going to learn how to do a chain stitch. So one of the first things that you're going to learn in crochet is how to do a chain. Most, not all, but most projects do start with a chain. You'll see this often abbreviated as CH in patterns. But before we can do our chain, we actually have to start with a slip knot. Now, slip knots are used in almost every single craft project, so I apologize if you already know how to do a slip knot. We're still going to talk. And there's no right way or wrong way, so whatever works best for you to make it happen. The important part with your slip knot is that the side you pull on to lengthen and shorten is the side that attaches to your ball of yarn, and not the other side. If you end up doing it on this side, you will end up with a project that will come loose and unravel, and that kind of defeats the purpose of all that hard work. So, I'll show you a couple of methods. Easiest method is to flop your yarn over itself. I'm going to pick up this little piece here where the two joined, and then I'm going to reach through my little hole, grab the yarn that goes towards my ball of yarn, and then pull it all tight. So super over exaggerated here. Here's my tail end, and that's what I'll leave that till I'm completely finished my work and weave it in. And then here's the end that goes to my ball of yarn, and this is the end that when I pull on it will make that loop. I made it not really tight. Will make my loop shorter, smaller, or bigger. It comes from that side, and that is really something that you want to pay attention to. Again, no sense in doing all that work to create something just to have it unravel a few days later or the first time it goes through the wash. Again, putting it on the desk, looping it over works just fine. I worked in the apartment industry for many years, and I tied a lot of balloons for the front signs. And so I kind of think of this the same way as tying a balloon. I wrap it around my fingers. So same thing, have my little crisscross here, and then I pinch between my two fingers as if I was tying a balloon. And that's how I do my slip knots. But again, no right way, no wrong way. You just want to make sure that you leave enough of a tail. Make sure you leave a decent sized tail too. If you're trying to conserve yarn and you leave this itty bitty little piece on the end here, then no amount of weaving that in is going to get it. You're always going to end up with a little tail sticking out of the side of your crochet project. So you want to leave a couple of inches. I'd say 3 to 4 is a good size to work with, because you could still get a needle on there in order to sew it in if you want to sew it in. And leaves plenty there for you to get through. We have our slip knot. We're going to start with our chains. And you're making exactly what it sounds like. You are making chain link. So just so happens I have this little key chain. And when you're done with your chain stitch, you are ultimately, it's really hard to do on a slippery surface, going to end up with something that looks kind of similar to this. That's our goal. So we're going to take that. Doesn't really matter which side goes on which at this point. You're going to pull your slip knot so that it is snug but not tight on your crochet hook. You want to make sure that that hook can still move freely within that spot. Otherwise, you're going to have a wonderful time trying to pull the loop through. With our working yarn, we're going to do what's called a yarn over, which means you're taking the yarn and you're putting it over the crochet hook. Okay, let me do that again. I know that's quite a concept. Taking the yarn, looping it over the crochet hook. Yarn over. You'll see this abbreviated as YO. Very tricky, I know. Which way you loop it over, I always loop back to front myself, but in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't too much matter. And it also depends on how you're holding your crochet hook. I like to hold it like a pencil. That's how my mama taught me. So, yarn over. You're going to want to make sure you've got some tension on this piece of yarn that's going towards your ball. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to pull it through. I pinch my work here so that I can have this hand free to actually manipulate that yarn. I'm going to take my hook, catch that yarn over I just did, and pull it through my slip knot. So, again, make sure that it moves nice and freely on that crochet hook. Repeat. Yarn over the crochet hook. Grab that yarn, have a little bit of tension but not too much, don't pull too tightly. Catch that yarn with your hook, pull it through that loop that was on, and there we are. With a chain, you will always start with one loop and end with one loop. Very important to note that now as we get into some of the more complicated steps. Counting how many loops are on your hook will become important. So yarn over, catch that yarn, pull it through your loop. So a few little notes here. When you're pulling through that loop, it is easier if you angle the head of your hook here, that catch spot, towards the bottom of your work. If you're pulling on that work, it creates a nice space for that hook to go through without catching on the yarn. If you're at a different angle or you're not pulling it on at all, you're going to just end up snagging both loops with the hook as opposed to looping one through the other. So that is the process of a chain. And as you can see, let me get a few chains here so you really get a good view. Our chain looks pretty gosh darn similar to the chain on our keychain hook here, hence why it was aptly named. Now, if you're struggling with the concept of a chain using a crochet hook, you can also do this just with your fingers. And sometimes it helps when you're first beginning to just understand how the yarn is working. Very similar to how we just did our slip knot, actually. We're going to reach through our loop, grab our working yarn, pull through. Now, when you're doing it with your fingers, you don't have a hook there to change your size, so you want to make sure you don't pull through too much. But this is exactly what the hook is doing. Just now we're doing it with our fingers. This is hand crocheting, and it is perfectly a legit way to do it too. But as you can see, just like we were doing before, there's our lovely little chain. So one more thing before we sign off. When it comes to beginning crochet, and this isn't directly related to the chain, but this is a good time to start practicing, is something called tension. And tension is how hard you are holding onto your yarn. And this becomes super obvious when you're doing a chain, what your tension is, because if you have a lot of tension, you're never going to, again, get that through there. So, again, no right or wrong in crochet. Everything is based on what works for you, but you want to make sure that there is something going on in this yarn. If it's just loose and floppy there and you're holding this, you are never, ever going to be able to get it through. It's just going to keep flopping off your hook. So play around with it. Find what works for you as far as how to hold the yarn with your other hand. Something to keep in mind, holding your yarn should never create pain. So if you are finding that you're trying to grip that yarn and you're trying to manipulate, your fingers are going to get really, really sore, really tired, really fast. Everybody, again, is a little bit different. I like to weave it through my fingers, and this way I can pinch between my fingers to make more tension if I need and loosen up and make less tension. I can also grip it a little bit this way. I pinch between my pinky and the palm of my hand to put more tension if I need to. But this, I have found for me personally, works really well for creating tension without creating tension in the muscles. Clarify, tension on the yarn, but not in the muscles. I will also, depending on the kind of yarn I'm working with, if it's something that's a little finer or a little slipperier, I will take the yarn and actually loop it over my pinky. And that just creates a little bit more tension for some of the slipperier things. Always, if you do loop, make sure that the working end is on the inside. If you loop it the other way, it just constantly falls right off your finger. So there are some videos on there that have this elaborate, you wrap it this way, you wrap it that way. And I'm like, I'm not knitting my fingers into this. I'm just trying to crochet a chain. So that's a little bit excessive in my opinion. But again, whatever works for you to hold your yarn. You want to make sure though that these fingers are free, because it's going to become very important that you can grab onto your work with that hand in order to create your stitches. So however you wrap the yarn, try to keep it on just your 3 fingers here, making sure that these are free to pinch your work, and that leaves your right hand free, or left hand if you're doing this reversed, to manipulate your actual crochet hook. This is, if you've watched my video about yarn, you'll notice right quickly if you're using a less soft yarn. So this is some Red Heart that I've had for who knows how long, and already I can feel where it's dragging on my fingers. It just tends to get a little bit of kind of a minor rug burn. So there are options out there. There are tutorials on how to crochet things that you can put around your fingers. There are special apparatus that you can buy to actually put on your fingers that you then weave the yarn through. But I would just say, you know, just find a yarn that feels better to work with, and then it's not an issue. So there you go. There is your basic on how to do a chain stitch. Tune in next time when we talk about doing slip stitch.